Well, hello and welcome to the final wind-up for our Digital Me MOOC. This is wind-up number 6, and indeed we're going to be winding up our 6th unit, which was all about thinking what we mean by the term digital reputation and what that might mean for you and your digital reputation. You will remember in the last unit, in Unit 4, we were talking about the use of Ancestry.com and the fact that we have digital identities, if you like, for want of finding them, of people who have been part of our family for many years and yet long dead. And therefore, if we're really going to think about digital identity, you can see the importance of it in terms of those that are living and have a future ahead of them, when the internet can even give us an identity of people who have been dead, perhaps in some cases for hundreds of years. It's quite extraordinary just how difficult it is today to avoid having some kind of web presence, even if we didn't even put it there ourselves, but others did it for us. Okay, so let's wind up the unit and see what we mean by this. We started out this MOOC with making footsteps, leaving footprints, if you like, on the internet. And we did it by sharing ideas before we went on and refined those ideas and so forth. But we started with a footprint. Each of us has put some kind of footprints down now, more than one, footprints down. And of course, as one begins to put footprints down, it's possible to aggregate those interventions onto the web in order to come up with what one might call a digital identity. And that's something that perhaps we've been pretty much in control of in terms of what we want people to see of us, how much of our lives we wish to make available to others to look at, the sort of things that excite and engage us that we want to share others in a discussion as well. But we get some degree of control over identity. But in this unit, we've been talking about digital reputation, which is something slightly different. Now, an identity is something that can be fixed. You know, it is what you are. It's sort of a very black and white thing. It's not suggestive that that identity is open to alteration at all. But of course, that's exactly the point of the web. Being a dynamic and alive place, it means that whatever is on the internet, whatever you put there by way of what you want to describe, if you like, as your identity, it is actually in the hands of others who receive that information to make judgments about that. And of course, in making those judgments, they're deciding your digital reputation. So you're in charge of your digital identity, but others are in charge of how they interpret that, and therefore in charge, if you like, use that word, of your digital reputation. And because identity is something that can be worked on over time, then it is equally true that your digital identity is not a fixed thing at all. It is something that is either getting better or it is degrading. And it is my contention, and certainly something that we wanted to get across in this unit, that is very much in your hands. So think about what kinds of things, what kind of projections you want to make onto the web in order to define what that digital identity of yours is, and thereby manage to some degree, as best you can, your digital reputation. The reason for that is that your digital reputation, if it's a good one, is likely to lead to economic success and also to success and pleasure, if you like, in using the web in your private life and in your hobbies and pastimes and in your local communities and what one might call active citizenship as well. It all comes down to the fact that we want to have a good relationship with the people that we interact with through the internet. We call that your digital reputation. So it's very much in the hands of your audience, it seems, what they make of you, but that doesn't mean that you get to back out of it completely. And we've taken this journey with this MOOC, if you like, to try and get you to see the difference between two different states, one being tech savvy and one being digitally literate. And the tech savvy state, of course, is any person who is at home with the use of different types of technology and facility. And nothing wrong with having different degrees of that or using different types of technology, but the point is it describes people who are good at the use of technology. And the digital literate end, which is very much to do with managing your digital identity and how that identity turns into reputation, is what we're aiming at, if you like. We didn't expect within 6 units that you would be able to make a journey, the complete journey, if you like, from one of tech savvy to digital literate. But if you have enlightenment and understanding understanding of the difference between the two and where you see yourself sitting between those two extremes, then that is a great place to be, because it now means that it's in your hands, if you like, to decide where you go next, the kind of journey that you need to go on, the pace and the speed at which you want to make that journey as well. Very much down to you, if you understand that discernible difference between the two states. It's important to get hold of that. Let's have a look at some of the activities then that went on this week. And first thing I wanted to pick up on was that a number of people said that they didn't want to have a physical representation of themselves online. Some people said they actually quite liked having a private life. Now, when it comes to managing your digital identity, there is no requirement to have a set of or a suite of placements on the web in order to make up a picture of who or what you are. The whole point about working and living on the web is that each of us is a unique person, and therefore we should expect to have a unique identity, and how we present that identity will be as peculiar as each of us is, and I include myself in that as well. We are absolutely peculiar in the sense that none of us is the same as anyone else. So what we do and how we do it is down to you, and there isn't really any need to defend what kind of shape that identity takes that you make, as long as you understand the reasoning behind why you've taken the decisions that you have, and you're comfortable with those. You're comfortable with the way you come across. Digital identity and reputation is not about hoodwinking people. It is about trying to be honest with yourself first, and then honest with your audience as well. It creates far too much of a burden, really, to try and keep up a pretense of who or what you might be. And one starts to get this sense, if you like, and we talked about it very briefly in the last unit, that the web starts to control us. It takes us over, because it starts to make demands on us and our time. We want to avoid that. It's not what we're after with this at all. So we need to be comfortable with what we're putting out there. So it doesn't require an apology, if you like, to not have a huge digital identity. Let each one be as unique as we are, and let's celebrate that. And that's absolutely the way it should be. A quick point about using telegamy and the avatar app, which I mentioned it was in the program notes for the unit, in the lesson notes for Unit 6. I know some of you found that quite a useful way of presenting yourself, and yet at the same time not having to show yourself, if you like. You can use an avatar who will stand in front of a picture that you've put there, which is meaningful to you, and then you put the words into the mouth of the avatar. So if you're concerned about having a live physical presence on the web, think about using avatars instead as a way of getting around that, and let the avatar, if you like, act as your other persona. I noticed also in the activities that not many people explored the use of Ancestry.com, and I quite understand that, again, because Ancestry.com, in fact, all of the search engines for previous generations have some kind of subscription package attached to them. And I've tried to make a point throughout this MOOC of only sharing things with you which were free initially, or had some kind of free aspect to them anyway, so that we weren't asking you to spend money. So I do understand that, but it's actually very interesting. Some of you might find it very interesting in trying to discover what you want your own digital identity to be. You might want to explore your ancestry to a degree, because who we were, if you like, or where we've come from, might actually help you. Certainly, I found it very interesting myself to decide who we are and how we want to represent ourselves and where we've come from. There are some quite strong cultural reasons behind that why people may want to explore their ancestry. So yes, there's a price to it, but I would encourage people to have a look at the site, even if it's just going as far as the free pages in all of that anyway, so that you get a sense of this digital identity of the past, really, and where our own family trees have gone from. It's actually quite interesting. You know, I again mentioned in the lesson notes that I've got a relative, I think his name was John Rebeck, who died back in the 17th century. Now, that's all we know about. He's the first Rebeck ever listed anywhere. And when he was born, when he got married, which were the other sort of parish records, if you like, didn't start at the time he was born and married. So we only have a death record for him. So there is a digital identity for a man, and all we know about him is when he died. But of course, if you think about the generation today, this is the first generation, the people perhaps who were born in the year 2005, 2004, that sort of time onwards, for whom a digital diary, if you like, could almost be kept on a daily basis of their lives. So we go through a whole life summed up with a date of death, to lives that can now be summed up or catalogued, if you like, on a day-by-day basis. Many people keep a log on the internet. They keep a web log. Now, if you conflate web log, you get blog, and that's where the word comes from. They keep a sort of an online diary, if you like, about what they've done, mainly for their own benefit. But of course, in terms of historical records, when your relatives of the future look back at you, they will be able to explore what you did on a given day, and it won't just simply be a record of censuses or births and deaths, marriages, and that sort of thing as well. Well, that's quite a profound thought, really, because whilst we might want to concern ourselves with our own digital reputation today, it's also interesting to think about what kind of legacy we want to leave for future generations, so that they understand us and our times and our circumstances and the issues and problems that we face as well. It'd be very interesting, would it not, to be able to look up a relative who perhaps lived 100 or 200 years ago and search through their life, if you like, on a day-by-day basis, seeing what kind of things influence them, how they approach the kind of problems and issues, many of which are just the same today, perhaps just on a different scale, but just to sort of see how that was tackled. It's actually going to make a huge change for the world of biography writing as well. Because again, one would have to look at several sources in order to write a biography 15, 20, 30 years ago. And that's obviously still the case today, but those sources are more readily available and in extraordinary detail as well. And of course, the subject matter of any biography, us, if you like, those of us that have a book written down, we would be able to influence it, because we would be able to keep these daily records, if you like, and make those readily available for those that want to study our lives in the future. So just interesting thought there to think about this, what one might call the legacy generation that we have now through the web, that we will be keeping a day-by-day legacy if we want to for future generations. Even if you don't keep your own blog, your future generations will be able to look back at your town, your street. They'll be able to look at the records of your employers. They'll be able to consider the news items that were big at the time, the cultural issues, the music and the arts, the festivals, the culture of the era as well. So there's a huge amount of information about our lives, which will be available in the future, even if we write not one word of it ourselves. Okay, let's move on. Other points. Yeah, that's on those. Right. Okay, let's see if we can just perhaps wind up now a little bit more of the MOOC as a whole, and reflect on what we've been doing here. I've mentioned this a couple of times before, but I want to do it again. I think it's really very, very important. We've made great play at the end of each unit to suggest that you go to the Google reflection forms and that you write a personal reflection there. It's a kind of a so what form. You've done the work, you've done the activity, you've read some stuff, you've listened to some people, you've engaged in conversation. So what? What do you get out of it? Two things that you should be able to answer when you do the so what. The first is exactly that. What did you get out of it? What has changed in your thinking as a result of the people that you have met, the ideas that you have confronted, the contributions that you've made? So what? What have you got out of it? And what has that all meant to you as you've gone along? And what does that mean to you in terms of your change of understanding? Now, we constantly add to our knowledge, but of course, when you add knowledge, it alters our understanding of the way we work. It modifies it, if you sense. We're able to modify it because we plug in the new information, and in order to make sense of what we know, we have to change our understanding about what we know as well in order to accommodate it, and that needs to be taken on board. But the second thing that you get out of this whole exercise is to be able to stand back from the course, stand away from what you've learned, and take a sort of a slightly broader view and say, look, what does this mean to me as a person? How am I going to change the way I behave on the web? What might I plan to do in the future in terms of my own learning and development? Where have I found areas that need more work from me? Because there are weaknesses in the way I approach my use of the web. Maybe it could be that things have fascinated you, and you said, look, something that I do want to study in the future is, well, indeed ancestry, something like that as well. So it gives you an opportunity to step back from yourself and to think about, the broader picture there. And you will use, I hope, the learning outcomes that we've listed on the Moodle forms there as well, on the Google forms rather as well. If you want to know what the learning outcomes are for this MOOC, they're listed there. I think there's 8 of them, and we've listed them on each of those Google forms so that when you've done your reflection, you can look at the quality and the quantity of what you've reflected about, and you can say where that work hangs on one or more of those learning outcomes. So you've been asked here to do something quite radical in a way. Instead of writing something and asking someone else to assess it, you're being asked to assess your own understanding, your own learning. And you make that sort of rational link between what you've done, what you've written, and what the outcome is meant to be. And hopefully you can make a link up between those 3. And if you can, then rather than giving your work to someone else to say, what do you think of this, and asking them to assess it, you've self-assessed your work, and then perhaps you can share it with others and say, do you agree with me? Do you think this is right? How might I have improved it? And it doesn't matter also that many of you on this course are at different standards, because the standard that you're at still allows you to achieve a learning outcome. It's just that the evidence that you use to demonstrate that learning outcome will be evidence that operates at different levels. So one of you may be able to talk about your ability to think and write creatively by saying, well, I've simply done something for the first time and it's a new thing to me. Well, that's still creative thinking and learning. It could be another person has used that site before and they have gone into advanced stages of creative and thinking in that area. Again, you would link to that piece of evidence. But the quality of the writing and the reflections simply shows the standard at which you're working, which allows you, of course, to reflect back, if you like, in 6 months' time or whatever, to look at those headings again and say to yourself, what have I done now? And can I show that from the evidence of what I've been doing, that my thinking and my practice is working now at a higher level than it was at that time? In other words, you can demonstrate development. So it's an interesting way of getting you to use personal learning space to begin to control and manage your own learning journey, which of course is a continuous thing through life. And it needs to reflect your needs and desires as well as what interests and captivates you as well. Learning is always and should always be fun. It should always be pleasurable and satisfying as you go. So it's a good way of using these Google Forms in order to do that. Can't stress enough how important I think that is. And I do hope that you take the time and effort to reflect on those Moodle forms, Google Forms, very carefully, please. So I think they're very important, and that you will keep those comments as well, because you'll be able to draw on those again in the future and other things that you want to do. Now, also, slight word of warning to those of you that said, well, I couldn't find much on the web. That's great, because I haven't put much there. Well, okay, but there is a rule, if you like, here, and we mentioned some of these already, these sort of general rules, but here's one for you, that if you don't put stuff on the web about yourself and manage your own identity in time, you will find that others will. And that will either be done intentionally or accidentally. It could be that you share information with another person privately, but that person, as part of a wider posting, puts that somewhere in a public space, which means that you've got stuff now in the public domain via a third party, and you may not even know it. You may not be aware of it, or maybe not. And sometimes people will write about you deliberately as well, or write about your ideas and so forth. So there is always value in trying to manage your own reputation, because there is no better, more reliable source, if you like, about who you are and what you are than yourself. Well, some may argue with that. They might say that we are all naturally subjective and biased, but nevertheless, if anyone is going to come to a view about who or what you are, judge your digital identity, they would be very sensible to rely and to treat as valid information that you put there about yourself as in particular, because it is likely to be factually correct, unless you're just downright lying. I mean, that's the truth of it. It's likely to be correct. So, in my view, I think it's better to manage your own identity before others do it to you. And you may come up with results that you don't like. Indeed, some of you were reporting when you were Googling yourself that you were finding information about yourself that you didn't put there, and that others put there for you, if you like. Most of you seem to be happy with the content, but that may not always be the case, of course. And as if those of you that possibly develop your digital reputation into some kind of digital celebrity, and many today argue that the successful people of tomorrow, economically successful people of tomorrow, must have some degree of digital celebrity about them. Then this is going to be very important to you in particular, because there will be lots of people who will want to use the web directly to be critical of you as a person as well. There are no free rides on the internet, it seems, and the more one becomes well known on the net, it seems that there seem to be people that want to have views to the opposite as well. So do be careful if you don't manage your reputation that others don't do it to you. Keep an eye on it, and keep an eye on Googling yourself occasionally and see what comes up about you that others have put there. Remember that if you find anything that's factually incorrect, that you can go to the host server for that site and ask them to withdraw it as well, because factually incorrect information is of no value to anybody at all. Okay, I think I've said all I want to on the unit itself. Well done again for those of you that had a crack at putting something up there about yourselves. There were a couple of people that said, look, I really don't want to put anything up there. Well, that's absolutely fine. But of course, in even writing that, you are starting to develop your own digital identity by saying the kind of private person that you are. It was quite instructive that one student who said, I really didn't want a digital identity, actually had a very, very nice photograph attached to their posting as well. So, even in something as simple as that, you're beginning to create a digital presence as well. So think carefully about how even you say no thank you, because in the process you're actually creating something on the web. Okay, so what have we got out of this MOOC? Well, as I said, the underlying thing really was getting you to get a sense of tech savviness and digital literacy, the difference between the two, and understanding whereabouts between the two you are particularly situated and what you want to do about it. And we started in Unit 1 talking about the value of crowdsourcing in order to do this. Just putting something on the internet, just explaining something about who we are or what interests us and so forth. In the second unit, we asked you to contribute to the ideas of others, and we looked at how do we improve people's postings. This idea of refining, adding, factually correcting information, providing alternative ideas and solutions, all ways of positively improving ideas that have been posted on the web. And the important lesson, remember, of attacking the idea, not attacking the person, and that we should never attack people, but only ever address the arguments. In attacking people, that is tantamount to giving up on trying to win the argument. So that was in Unit 2. In Unit 3, we moved on again from that, but started to think about validity and reliability and saying, well, if we're going to make contributions, why should other people value them? And in order to value them, we have to demonstrate validity and reliability, and what those two ideas are all about. So we were developing all the way through those first 3 units, this idea of sharing ideas, improving ideas, and developing the quality of thinking that goes on. as a way of working on the web. And in fact, already in those 3 units, beginning to identify and develop a digital footprint, then footprints, and then identity. In the 4th unit, we moved out of that and looked at the public persona, us as people, not just as people who want to share ideas, but perhaps want to use the web in order to manage our private lives and do our shopping and to vote and to take part in civic activities and so forth. And really just an exploration of the wider web, if you like, and what else is going on out there. In the next unit, we then went on and had a look at the kind of mistakes that people make. And a very important point here is that we didn't want to embarrass people. We wanted to show up a kind of a rogues gallery to demonstrate how easy it is to make mistakes in how we use the web, because we make assumptions about the way people are going to read what we post. And the web is full of funny, unintended consequences because of people making silly assumptions, and we wanted you really to understand how easy it was to make assumptions, so that hopefully you read everything that you wanted to do once, twice, maybe 3 times, in order to make sure that it couldn't be misconstrued in any way, and to look at security settings and so on. And then in this last unit, then we've actually made the final part of the journey to say, look, how do we turn this digital reputation thing on, and why it's important, and why you need to do it as well. In the future, in the very, very near future, the web is going to be an area where we're going to be able to demonstrate who we are, not just our hard skills, not just our competencies, but what our attributes are, what our achievements are generally, what kind of attitudes we bring to the world, even our aptitudes, if you like, as well, who we are as rounded people. It used to be 10, 15, 20 years ago that we simply collected certificates of qualification that demonstrated what we were safe to do in terms of skills for employment. But we can use the web now in a much more general, wide way, much more rounded way to say, well, look, certainly I can demonstrate my competencies, but I can also demonstrate all these soft skills as well, this much more kind of rounded person that I am. And the other great thing, of course, we can do with the web is not simply talk to one person at a time, but we can address the world as a whole. We talked in one of the previous units about this 6 degrees of separation, which is now perhaps 1, maybe 2 degrees of separation only. It seems to be now possible for us to communicate directly with any other person on the planet directly if they have internet connection. It's an extraordinarily powerful way of connecting and sharing ideas and who we are. But we have to have something to tell. We have to have something to say. We have to have something of value, because no performance is genuinely a performance unless there's an audience to hear it. And the audience has got to be there and interested enough to want to hear it, which is why we have to make it worthwhile. So we can move away from this idea of having certificates of our skills, which we simply demonstrate to employers or others one at a time, to what we can now do on the web, where we can actually say, hello world, this is me. We can take our story to the planet, and that story need not simply be a list of skills and abilities that we have, but it can be a genuine and well-researched, well thought out, and valued by others identity of who we are and what we have to offer the world. And if it's done well, and if it's done craftily, and if it's done in good faith, it will help every one of you to develop a really strong future economic and private life through the web. I wish you well with it. I do hope that you've enjoyed the enlightenment that we've tried to bring to you in this MOOC, and that you will go on and study other things and find other things of interest. So, with the idea of hello world, this is me, which is the kind of motto, if you like, that I would like to leave you with, I'm signing off now. Wish you well, and thank you ever so much for your time and attention, and very best wishes for your futures.